Hi, and welcome to part 4 of this video series, Accelerating AI with Continuous Delivery. Now, in this part, what we'll be doing is we will be using a tool called DVC, which is short for Data Version Control, and we will use it to store our data and also version it. Now, when I say data, this is the data that is used for our model training. Now, let's see what the problem is. Say that we have multiple people working on the same project. Now, each computer basically then stores the data that is used for our model training. Now, once these people actually work on the code itself, so they change the training code and they get different results, they also might want to try different data to test that model with. Now, basically later on we want to save this data somewhere, and what happens is data gets duplicated, which is not good. Now, usually the data that is used for our model training, this can basically range either in megabytes, which is okay if we duplicate it, but if it's gigabytes or terabytes of data, then we don't want the data to duplicate. And basically DVC solves that for us. Now let's see how DVC works. What happens is in our project directory, we add a stage with DVC, and then the files are hashed, versioned, and stored in the DVC cache. When we decide to do our model training, we perform the checkout command, which basically the versioned files are then relinked back into the project that we are currently running. Now, this is actually really good because DVC then only stores references to the same file. This means that the file won't get saved multiple times, only a reference will be used. And this basically solves data duplication. Data can be saved in multiple cloud providers with DVC, so it has support for AWS, Google Cloud, and others. Now let's see how the whole workflow looks like in the end. So Git is used for our code storage, and DVC is used for storing the data for training our models. Now the whole workflow basically looks like this in the end. So we perform a Git pull, we perform a DVC pull, and the data for training our models gets pulled from AWS, Google Cloud, or any provider that we are using for data storage. Afterwards, what we do is we perform this command, which trains, fine-tunes, experiments, and tests. And once we're done, we basically commit our code back to the repo, and then we also push the data back into the DVC storage. Now, this is how DVC works. So let's now use DVC in our own project. Let's first start by creating an account on AWS, and because I already have one, I'm going to wait for you. So make sure you create your account, and then we will create an S3 bucket, and afterwards we'll also create our access credentials. Now, once you've managed to successfully create an account on AWS and sign in, you'll be located at the main dashboard. So don't worry if it looks really scary, we'll only be using the basic functionality of S3 buckets. So if you don't have S3 on the recently visited, like I do over here, just click on the search tab and write in S3, and you should be able to see S3 over here. So let's click on it. Now afterwards, what we want to do is we just want to create a bucket. So let's click on the create bucket button. Now we just need to name it. So here you can name it anything you want as long as the name is unique. So AI minus semaphore minus bucket. Now leave all of the other options intact and just scroll down below and click on the create bucket button. And the bucket should be created really fast afterwards. And this is all you need to do in order to create your first S3 bucket on AWS. Just make sure you write this name down. Now the next step that we're going to do is we are going to see where we can get the credentials for our AWS CLI. So let's go into our profile. So over here above, let's click on our username and let's click on security credentials. Now, when you click on security credentials, we will go into the My Security Credentials dashboard, and what you need to create is an AWS access key. Now, you can do this by scrolling down to this section over here, so the access keys section, and you can just click on create access key. And because we're doing this for the CLI access, you can check, I understand creating a root access key is not a best practice. Now let's click on create access key over here. And the next steps are that you need to copy this thing somewhere safe and also copy the second part of this into a safe place as well, because we will be using these two later on. Now with this step, when you click on done, you've successfully created an AWS access key. Now that we've successfully set up AWS, what we need to do is go into our project directory, open up the terminal, and start setting up DVC. So we just go into our directory. What we need to do is activate our virtual environment first. So typing in this command. And once we get this .vn over here, everything is ready to be set up. So we just need to type in the DVC init command, and afterwards DVC will do its stuff. Now, if it's working, you'll see the .dvc directory over here, and you'll also see a few specific .dvc files. Now, with this, we've created the basic DVC structure. Now, what we will be adding is stages. Now, if you remember when we were talking about stages in DVC, stages help us set up our pipeline for training our models. Now, we will be adding 3 stages. So the prepare stage, the train stage, and the test stage. Now, the commands are available inside the documentation of the repository that we are using. So let's just first run up the stage command. And you can see that it goes through. Now, the stage command, what it does is it just triggers the prepare command, which basically extracts our images. So everything that we were doing manually in the previous lesson, we want to automate this with DVC. The second command is going to add the training stage. So the training stage, basically what it does is it trains our model and it outputs the files that we need. So this part of the command over here basically outputs the files that we need later on. So the confusing matrix, the top losses, the fine-tune results, and also the results of our model training, so how successful it was. And the last stage that we want to add is the testing stage. Now with the DVC stage command, we can add as many stages as we want. This basically depends on what kind of workflow we have. But in our workflow, we only first prepare the data, then we train the data, and then we test if everything is okay. Now that we've run these 3 commands, we've successfully set up DVC locally. So let's go to the next step. Now that the workflow for DVC is set up, what we need to do is run the DVC repro command. Now, what this does is it triggers our workflow, and you can see that it starts running the stages. This prepare stage and now the train stage, and this train stage takes some time. Now, these are all the scripts that we've run in our previous video. Now we're just automating the whole process through DVC. Now, once this goes through, what we'll do is we will push our data to the S3 bucket. So now let's set this up. Okay, now let's connect DVC to our remote storage on S3. Now make sure you have your access keys available, because if you haven't signed in yet, it will ask you for the access keys. Now the first thing that we need to do is we need to run the AWS S3 ls command. Now this will list all of our buckets that we have. Now currently we only have 1 bucket if you're doing this for the first time, and you can see that this is the bucket that I've created. Now what we need to do next is we need to add this bucket to DVC. So this can be done with this command. So DVC remote add, and what we'll do is this is the basic command that you have in the documentation. You just need to replace this part with the name of your bucket. So my name AI minus semaphore minus bucket. And here you need to write the same thing. So AI minus semaphore minus bucket. Now this last thing here is where you are writing the data. So a new folder will be created, so you can just leave it as it is. Now just run this command and DVC is successfully connected to your S3 bucket. Now let's make this the default bucket for storing our data. So this is the command called DVC remote default, and let's just specify this bucket. Now DVC will use this bucket as the default. The last step of this is to push our data into the S3 bucket. Now this is done with the command called DVC push. Once we trigger this command, it will take some time for the data to get uploaded to the S3 bucket, so just let it run. Now once this successfully finishes, you've successfully pushed all of your data to the cloud, and anybody else that is using the same workflow can just use DVC push to get their data to their local machine. This will then lead to you not duplicating your data across your workflows, and that is the whole point of using DVC. Okay, finally we're done. DVC has pushed a lot of files into our S3 bucket, 1,800 in my example. And if you check it out, in the DVC folder, you now have the cache, which we've already talked about. So DVC caches your data. Now this is really cool. Now the last part that we need to do is we actually just want to commit to code. So this DVC configuration that we've done, we just want to add it to GitHub. Now just run this command, git add, and let's commit everything. So with this, we basically finalize our process of setting up DVC, and everything is configured and ready to go. We've added DVC to our project. So what's next? In the next part of this video series, we will be checking out Hugging Face. So first what we'll do is we will build a Docker image, and then what we'll do is we will deploy our application to the Hugging Face platform so everybody will be able to see it. So make sure you subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you in the next part.